For the others, I would request you take your conversations outside. Thank you. Thank you very much. We kick off this panel discussion, which has been hosted by the National Disaster Management Authority, where for once we want to talk about proactive disaster management. Pakistan for the last 10 years has been impacted by, I think, almost all possible disasters, from the Gulf in the north to sea level rise in the south and everything else in between, floods or droughts, etc. We come to these COPs with the hope that there will be support from developed countries in terms of finance, in terms of technology transfer. But the reality is that disasters are not waiting for anyone. And therefore we have to work at the domestic level to ensure that we have the right proactive disaster management at the country level. To discuss this, we have a distinguished panel. I will start from my right. We have Mr. Hans Gutmann, the Executive Director of the Asian Disaster Preparedness Center, who has about 25 years of experience in the field. We have with him the Lieutenant General Inam Haider Malik Saab, the Chairman NDRMF. Thank you for hosting this session, sir. We have Ms. Catherine Wong, the Team Leader for the Climate and Security Risk from the UNDP, 15 years of experience. Thank you so much for being with us today. And then we have Aisha Khan, who is the head of the Mountain Glacier Initiative, as well as the head of the CS in Pakistan, the force behind putting the climate communities and the civil society together to have one coach of voice in taking things forward. Thank you very much. I will start off by inviting Sir Inam to open the conversation, help us understand how NDRMF, given the mammoth, given the scale of disasters that we've been dealing with over the last, not to speak of the super flood of the 2022, where we gained a lot of experiences, and we see some of these videos playing over here, which really explains a state-of-the-art disaster management center that we have put together. Sir, what are the lessons that you would like to share at this platform?
Thank you very much. In the context of Pakistan's proactive disaster management, I would like to just initiate the basic dialogue on how this fragile economy could not afford any of these disasters or future emergencies. We are also aware of global risking all of these donors fatigue, and there are a number of incidents which are pretty unprecedented, unpredictable floods were happening and disasters were appearing every other country around Pakistan. Unless we could start away with proactive adaptation, mitigation, these type of debates within Pakistan, it would be very difficult for Pakistan to come out of this economic lock that Pakistan goes into this stress of fragile economy, experiencing major disasters again and again. We wanted to collect both of these elements of knowledge risk together, and then an early warning capability to early warn the people who could be part of this response. Now, it was important for us to understand as a community, as a society, that what all is risking, then what all are the disasters that we have to prepare for, and who all are the people of knowledge with this management thing. We collected all of these universities, institutes in Pakistan, and we collected them into a national think tank called National Institute of Disaster Management. And then we connected them with the global equivalents around the similar geographical zones around the world. Like our mountain areas institutes, they are talking to the old zones of the world, like Canada, Northern Europe, and the desert universities. People are Eastern and Western Australian universities. That you can see the display on the right. This was our effort to have or collected all the climate-related intelligence in one group, which could help developing those projections of future disasters and could enable at least 7 to 8 weeks time early warnings for Pakistan to enact a response which is mature and which can also reduce some of the losses and damages. To do that, this capability is now being done. This has been operationalized for the last 1 month, and we are trying to project our scenarios in the future. Like as of now, we are looking at what could happen to Pakistan in February, March 2024, and if we could have a larger, reliable sense of this disaster in next year, then we could inform our communities. We can respond more effectively by engaging people, by passing this communications to the most remotest place in our landscape, reaching out to the people and the families in the remotest villages in the language they understand, and we could early warn them to at least move away from the harm's way. If that's done, I think most of the life and livestock will be spared and safe, and then the relief will be easy, and then recovery and rehabilitation will also become very quick. So it will lessen the cost of damages, and then in times we are also creating a number of simulation exercises at various levels where the communities are involved, the military component, law enforcement, volunteer, NGOs, our global partners, UN organizations, NDPC in a big way, and all other people with lots of knowledge. They're coming together to find out the solutions which are both Pakistan template, which are like focused on the local usages of material which are there available. And we are also looking at how to empower people quickly within the disaster zone so that they can rise up on their feet quickly and then they can reconstruct from there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that detail. It helps to understand how we're trying to increase the time in how you communicate to the communities. I shall turn to you. We've heard how the government actually plays a role in ensuring the system is set up. But the system also needs the communities to respond to it in time as well. I'd like you to share your experience in terms of where Pakistan has done well, given the multitude of disasters that we have had to deal with. And where exactly are those opportunities where we can partner to improve when some of the colleagues over here taking this role?
Thank you very much, Ashmara. Since I have been working with communities for the last 2 decades, I think I can share some of the experiences that I have, and they start with the disaster that happened in the mountain regions, the earthquake in 2003, followed by the big earthquake in 2005, and then the super floods in 2010, and then subsequently, the disasters in 2022. So all these experiences, what they lead me to understand is that we need to start with the smallest tier. We need to start planning ahead of time in what you call proactive disaster management. I think management cycle has its own cycle of activities, but now we have moved towards risk reduction. So risk reduction means identifying the hazard and also identifying the capacity, the coping capacity of that community to deal with that level of disaster and engaging them right from the beginning to be part of the planning process and to be part of the solutions that you have in mind. Because if you plan solutions that have not been discussed and owned by the community, it's very unlikely that they will respond to it. So the 2 lessons that I take away from disasters and being part of the community is the coping capacity to respond immediately, and the second is to engage them in the process of rebuilding their lives with dignity. I will wind up here, but I would just like to say that in disaster management, the most important thing is anticipation. So I'm very happy I visited NDRMF and I saw the center they have for collecting information, because timely information is the key to respond and save lives and also protect assets. So what I saw now gives me a greater sense of hope and confidence that in future we will be able to make those predictive determinations and issue timely warnings to communities to be able to save whatever we can and minimize risks for them.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Aisha. Ms. Wong, if you could hold the mic because I'm just going to come to you. Given your, yes, there's the security perspective. You talk about climate change as a new non-traditional security threat that we're having to deal with. And given the fact that they say when the right early warning systems in place 24 hours in advance are able to mitigate economic costs by about 30%. given that the UN is coming together, various layers of the UN coming together to set up an early warning system, an early warning for all by 2027. How well do you think that plugs into what Pakistan is doing together with the NDRMF and sort of bringing in the communities in the ambit? And where are the challenges, where are the recommendations, and how can we take this forward?
Thank you so much, Ashwala, for the question. I'm really honored to join this panel on behalf of UNDP. I'm based in New York, but our country office works very closely with NDMA, and I can only extend their congratulations for the incredible work that's been done here. And a lot of the times we are focused on sudden onset events, right, in the disaster community, but these slow onset events are quite important as well. We're looking at glacial retreat, we're looking at what the trends look like. At the moment, at 1.5 degrees, we're looking at a third glacial mass being lost in the Hindu Kush Himalaya region. This is known as the third pole, right, because of the amount of glacial resources that we have here. 250 million people living in Hindu Kush Himalaya region, 2 billion people dependent on water systems that originate from this particular very ecologically sensitive region, and another 3 billion people, altogether 3 billion people also depend on water systems as well. So I think we have the challenges of long-term adaptation, understanding how the different scenarios play out, but then disaster risk reduction, a more proactive approach, as we mentioned now as well, which means the difference between life and death. We know that as well. From the UNDP side, we are honoured to be able to support the Block 2 project, the support of GCF, and to extend its coverage from 2 districts in the region to 10. And what does that mean? That means it's support to 30 million people, or about 10% of the population as well. There's, I think, an incredible effort here, as was mentioned by our colleague as well, not just looking at the plug infrastructure investments that we need, at the same time bolstering Gabion walls, making sure that early warning systems are in place, that automated weather systems are there, that we are getting to better anticipation, but also understanding differentiating risk, the differentiating vulnerabilities at the same time as well. Vulnerabilities of not only women and young people, 65% of the population in Pakistan is considered, according to global definitions, to be youth, but also remote communities living in mountainous areas and what their vulnerabilities are like compared to other communities. So I think there's a lot of excellent work that's also being done by Pakistan together with UNDP, includes the Glaciers and Students projects. And I've mentioned in the previous session just now, youth are the future, youth are the leaders, youth have agency here as well, and being able to bring in the next generation of climatologists and experts who can help lead the way in this particular space is very important as well. So you've been working with students to strengthen their understanding, offering trainings to 140 students and government officials from Karawar International University of Pakistan already as well, and that's together with the Environmental Protection Agency for Gilgit and Pakistan. And this also includes avalanche training manuals and trainings that have been conducted together as well. So I think there's a really excellent approach here by NDMA, in terms of the preparedness, response, long-term investments in capacities that are needed at the same time.
Thank you very much. We spoke of differentiated capabilities, and I think this is the right time where given that ADB sees a network of 9 countries, which means lots of cross-sectoral learning, lots of lessons from one country to the other. Given what you've heard, where would you place Pakistan when it comes to disaster management, in addition to just the early piece of it? Where are the opportunities and what are the missing?
That's a complicated question, but I will do my best. I think, as you have all referred to, there has been a number of significant, large, catastrophic events which have shaped where we are now in terms of prioritization. We can look at other countries. If we take a development path of Bangladesh, for example, in that they moved from having catastrophic human losses back in the 70s due to cyclones. With a lot of investment, with a lot of work focusing on that particular part, they now have very few fatalities, even with pretty extreme events. Here we're talking about devastating earthquakes, floods, exacerbated by droughts. I think a couple of years ago also there was a big locust storm that was destroying a lot of issues. So I think now with this initiative and with NDRMF spearheading, but with a lot of other partners also involved, we are looking forward into a number of key elements. And one element is, of course, this issue of being able to provide early warning. And we refer to early warning for all. Now, that's a nice extension of WMO's earlier issue of multi-hazard early warning system and its 4 pillars, etc. Now, they have a focus, and we are embracing that also in terms of having impact-based forecasting. Not just sending out the forecast, but being clear on in this area, in this particular point, floods are going to cause certain type of damage, etc. Trying to tailor that warning so people can react to it in a very good way. Having said that, that approach and all of the, we were referring knowing the risks, doing all of the risk assessments first with a baseline on what are the threats. Because although we're talking about all hazard approach or multi-hazard approach, in the end, for any particular geographic situation, we will have to prioritize. This is not earthquake prone by flood and drought, or vice versa. Up in the mountains, you have different threats compared to down in Karachi and other places. But what this means that you have an enormous amount of requirement for information. Fortunately, we have more satellites, etc. Community engagement, sort of society's information and getting information from locals through mobile phones, etc. provides great opportunities, but it needs to be systematic. And I think a step in the right direction is not only these operation centers, but bringing together your think tanks, so we say, setting up the institute. Now this needs to be linked up with your early warning generators, such as the meteorological agencies, and also working on with communities and other how to tailor that. So I think there is a very good direction. I hope that the IPC can assist and support this. We should not fool ourselves saying that there is some obstacles, and particularly this information management, which can be greatly facilitated by computers and other things, but that mechanism is something that probably put a lot of effort in, and we would be happy to work alongside you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That lays out the problems as well as the opportunities. Now, sir, I'll come back to you, given what you have heard around the panel. Where do you see how we can synergize the messages that are coming and how we can integrate to ensure that the center that we have actually integrates these elements in the right way?
We are actually very positively engaged with all stakeholders within the country, and there is support bases which are available around the world. And we are trying to reach out to find out the best global risk financing which can become part of this process of proactive disaster management in Pakistan. Because we understand the statement will not be able to galvanize the sources that would require for meaningful response to any other future disasters, whether it could be flood, early heat, or maybe a food security related challenges. So there could be, we need to activate larger centers of support within Pakistan, and we are more into our indigenous capability of having support from private sector within Pakistan. We have also reached out to make our industries component of this disaster management response. And we are calculating the impacts and needs, and then we are sharing these needs with all other responders within Pakistan, the UN development partners, our other partners in represented in international NGOs and NGOs. And then we have also shared these calculated databases with our Pakistan missions abroad in other countries. So we've also engaged our diplomats, our high commissioners, ambassadors, and so everybody is taking some part of this message. And now we are into a stage where we are able to develop a capability to transmit these early warnings and alerts to all mediums within Pakistan, and reaching out to the people, and preferably in the language that they understand, so that we can early warn them, we can make an alert, and we can ask them to become part of this exercise. Now, as just like we prepare for our war, we prepare for these disaster responses. So we are preparing well ahead of time. Like 3 to 4 months earlier, we would like to conduct coordination conferences, our contingency planning, our think academia's involvement in it, and we have conducted 3 major national level simulation exercises on the subject of our floods in mountains and then some mountains emergencies in arid Rajasthan, and also on the coastal emergencies. So this will also give lots of experience to our people of all walks of life to become part of this response, and that we see the national response will be more mature. We've also registered that there are a number of people who have been trained and by our NGOs, they've been part of this disaster management at least once in a time in our last 10 years. So we have documented them, and we have also catered for them as a volunteers which can be used in our next disasters. So regulation of our NGOs operations to avoid duplications or overlaps is part of this strategy. We are trying to also reach out to our communities so that they also evolve some self-help basis responses on their own, because we believe that the family or the group elder in the house will be the first responder to the disaster before a formal aid would come. So this is the process that, but in the larger sense, whatever new projects are being developed, what are new development expansion of the cities are planned, we are linking them to the Green Climate Fund or the other climate funds associated with these type of facilities, and so that we can support some part of these developments which are in line with global resilience protocols, the standards of these constructions, and the infrastructure which is able to withstand the next disaster. So prevention of lives and the loss of lives and livestock, as well as prevention of our infrastructure collapses in the future disasters is also one of the key focus. Recently, we have initiated an exercise on National Disaster Management Infrastructure Audit. Now, this exercise is taking place into all our urban areas, and then it will expand into our rural areas too, to find out that what all are the weaknesses that are there in the existing infrastructure. Some of them could be retrofitted, some of them could not be. So, what good global practices can be copied in designing and developing our new infrastructure, especially those which have been lost after the last floods. So these are some of the ways in which we can learn from the global world outside, and we can also focus on our indigenous capabilities to withstand most of the disasters in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So there's the element in terms of just not focusing on the DRR part of it, but actually looking at actively disaster risk financing around how you ensure that the risk that you can retain versus the risk you get transferred. There's this whole insurance is a solution, there's multiple other areas that we can look into. Ms. Wong, I'll come to you. In terms of the role that UNDP can play, which is really thinking through how you raise finances for a disaster and risk it, layer it in the right way in terms of the assessments that we'll be discussing. Given that Pakistan is ready to explore those contours, where is it that UNDP can bring in the right support to take this beyond just DRR?
Thanks so much, Ashwana. I think this is a really important question as well in terms of ways forward. And UNDP has just launched its Anticipation Hub, which really focuses on putting the right data and analytics in place, right? Being able to overlay these very different and important layers of data so that we have a holistic picture of what the challenges are. So not only demographics, not only the incidence of poverty and other development challenges, but then also the biophysical hazards themselves and climate change vulnerabilities. So this builds on our broader work on crisis risk dashboards, and we have 20 such systems around the world at the moment. Some of them are country level, others are regional. We've been delighted to do this together with the US State Department as well, and we're looking to expand those capabilities at the moment. And I think they're really important platforms for our partners. In some countries we've been able to work together with other actors in countries so that we're able to map each of us our initiatives, and we have a common platform where we can understand how we are doing, what the specific challenges are in the different regions of any country, and then what the responses are and how they're working as well. So I think this data sharing capability is really important as well. And given the very precious resources that we have in terms of disaster risk financing, that we're able to make the best use of them and understand how effective our responses are over time as well. So I think there's a lot that's been done and a lot that we are doing, not only in terms of financing, but in terms of making sure that we can absorb that financing and that we can understand the effectiveness of any financing that we are raising at the same time. We also provide a lot of support to integrated national financing frameworks, again trying to leverage the different types of financing that are available, be it private sector, be it public, and again making sure we can provide transparency to those partners as well so they can understand the impacts of the financing that they're providing us.
Thank you. Data sharing is key, absolutely. That's where you base all your interventions upon. Aisha, given your time in the field, tell us how we spend money smartly.
I think that, the first thing we're talking about climate change over here, so we have to understand that it's a very uncertain science. We know that it's creating issues with global warming, but we don't know how it's going to impact us, when it's going to impact us. So when we work with communities, and I will just talk about mountain communities, we also need to take into account that most of the disasters that are going to happen or are projected to happen in Pakistan are meteorological disasters. So we begin with the cryosphere and we make our way down all the way to the delta. So the best way is to engage the communities and to ask them how do they see their own future, what are the hopes and aspirations for development, and build projects that are need-based and demand-driven. Because that's the best use of finance. We can't build a project sitting in Islamabad and taking it to the communities and expecting to get a buy-in. And that is the consultation process that is missing. We go through that practice, but it's mostly tokenistic. We don't actually listen to the communities, bring what they're saying down into the policy, and then develop projects that are based on their needs. So if we start doing that, we will be incorporating indigenous knowledge as well. We will be using local material, and local issues will be addressed by local communities, finding solutions that are best acceptable to them. And when you take that route, I think in a major way, you are ensuring your sustainability because you are creating community ownership. You are creating projects that are community-led. So wherever there is community stewardship, I think there you find greater ownership stakes, and that ensures that the money that you invested will have good results and good returns.
Perfect. Thank you. Mr. Kuterman, I'll come to you since we're on the subject of finances. We speak about the coordination challenges that we have at the international level, let alone bringing it down at the national level. Throw in the money problem into the coordination mix. Where do you think we pick the thread in pulling the thread through to ensure that whatever it is, with the right intention, that we come together as international entities to go and support countries at the national level, to actually not add to the problem, but really find solutions that the money is used in the best way possible?
Thank you for that easy question. I think there's a couple of issues in here. One is the issue we talked about just now, the risk transfer, looking into how can we use financial instruments to reduce risks or to transfer risks. Now, we also know that there are some golden opportunities, perhaps, in the sense that insurance is not used very extensively in Asia across the board, as compared to Europe and US and others. And the fact is that you have disasters in the US or Europe, and 40-50% sometimes of the actual economic damage is taken care of by the private sector already. Now, it's changing in Florida and some other places because of the frequency, etc. So that's an opportunity, but how readily do you turn that into action is probably a question that everybody would like to have a solution for. There's catastrophe bonds, there's other mechanisms who can help providing the financial resources either in advance or very shortly after to ease that fiscal strain that happens. But I think on that matter, I think there's a lot of work ongoing, and there are some mechanisms that are being tried and tested, and there's also an interest in the financial world to support these mechanisms. How sustainable they are, a bit like the insurance, is probably something we have to test the waters for as we move forward. But I'd like to turn to another element which I think is equally important in tying in back to the communities. And it's not just for the country to have resources access or at the national level. In 2016 at the World Humanitarian Summit, the Great Bargain as such was put forward. 25% of the international provided for financial assistance was intended to reach communities and local actors, up from 3% at that time. Unfortunately, our stock take for the moment is we've gone in the wrong direction. It's actually less than 3% now. And we still have international agencies acting at the national and sometimes on the local level. But a key issue there is really accountability. And I think that's an area where we are interested in trying to move in the Middle East. It's very difficult for international finance to be provided without strings attached because of the accountability by whoever is providing it. Now, how do you help the local entities of having at least a minimum of accountability, of record keeping, knowing what the money is actually spent on? And I think there's quite a bit of work that can be done with our local NGOs and civil society, but also with the auditors and the finance companies, who needs to make sure that there are a few people in these agencies who can do the proper bookworking, because I don't see a way out of it. We will really just give money and not look after how it's being used, because that's just open up a lot of things. So I think that's an interesting entry point also. So areas that we can build on and make better in terms of the national financial systems and insurance, etc. But also really put some more effort on, maybe not 25%, but if we can get 5 or 10% up from what it is now, then that will provide a lot of resources. And if we're talking about impact-based systems, if we're talking about early warning systems for or early warning for all, the fourth component in there is really for communities to have the resources. When they get the warning, they can actually do something. Then you have to have the finances or the economic resources to do that. And just wrapping up, I think it's important to always remember in this, when we're talking about finances, that one of the key, in many cases, the most important determinator of vulnerability is your economic status. If you have money, you can do a lot of things, and you can protect your family and everything. So it should not be ignored, and everyone should be there to drive forward.
Thank you for seeing as it is. I'll now turn my attention to the audience. Any questions, please raise your hand, your name, your affiliation, and who you want to direct the question to. Thank you. I see Shesa. And then here's yes. We have another.
First of all, thank you for an excellent session. We learned immensely. And thank you also for sharing the new developments at NDRMF. My question is about the coordination. Oftentimes in disasters, coordination becomes first victim. Institutional roles and responsibilities are not well coordinated. And sometimes there is a competition. And in a vacuum, some powerful institution comes up. A very good example recently was when we were having a tropical storm approaching Pakistan. Before, the provincial government was taking way too long to mobilize its resources. And we saw that the Ministry of Climate Change very proactively got engaged together with you, and then early warning systems started working in June. This was very good, but this was not part of the design. So I wanted to ask, and by way of example, I should also give one. I saw Bangladesh law that had defined the respected roles and responsibilities on the frontiers of disaster 1, 3, 4, 5, down to a police constable and a Patwari and a school teacher. And that was part of the law, and therefore ignorance of law was no excuse. Everybody had to be engaged. So my question to you is, what kind of thinking ensure inter-ministerial, inter-provincial and inter-departmental coordination. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Shesa, we'll take one or two other questions and then we come back to the panel.
Thank you. So part of my question has already been very specifically asked by from the chairman of India, but again, I'm very much specific to the donors and the UN communities. We face a lot of challenges while in case of any disasters to reach to the information. So how this recently established NCOC will help and can place some of the donors of the UN entities within the system so they can have very appropriate access to the information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We take these two and then sir, to you and then if others would
Sir, yes, it would be a matter of time when we would have done a number of contingency exercises with all stakeholders, so our SOPs would have been more refined and practiced. And we have done these about a couple of times. As I said, 3 simulation exercises we started this year. First was not up to the mark as we desired, but then second and third, people responded the way we wanted to do. It was all that we projected a simulation and then we asked people to have an hypothetical set of responses and then find out what actually falls within their domain of responsibility and how they would act and mobilize. So we defined a number of stages and who all will lead in a particular stage and would be in the support role in the next stage. So thereby pinpointing identification of responsibilities at multiple tiers and asking people to repeat it over and over again, and then take this down to the people on the street and the villages and the communities which are going to be impacted. The same way, in the same exercise, we also invited our development partners, NGOs and bigger organizations to have just in the session with us. So we'll have the liaison officers in their early warning centers, so they would be having a near real-time availability of information on who all is being impacted. And when we project this future disasters in advance, we would share this analysis on all other our support aid partners too, so that they can also prepare their likely sources of responses, from where their facilitation will come, from where the support articles would come. So it will also ease off some of the relief pressures because we will be avoiding duplications and overlaps and we will be guarding against the redundancies of certain equipment, which often becomes the case when we give a call and then everything comes unplanned. So these number of rehearsals, exercises, repetitions, and more frequent smart issuing of contingency plans will make this coordination more and more effective.
Thank you, sir. UNDP, ADPC wants to speak to the coordination challenge.
Thanks so much. I can try to speak to this question as well. I think increasingly we are seeing increased frequency, intensity of induced natural disasters. On the sheer scale, like for example in 2022 when we were talking about a national emergency, what we see is that security sector actors have become first responders to wildfires, to floods, and so I think there's a question here in terms of the capabilities that making sure we do have military and other actors that are engaging here in terms of response efforts at a national level, but they also have the right training. They're also part of this process as well. So I think this is quite an interesting point that's come up in a different context. We're working on how to appropriately address that. And then my other point would just be on gender here. We're thinking about women and girls on the move, for example, and how to coordinate those responses. We may have women heads of households, divorced women, single mothers as heads of households, widows as heads of households as well. They would typically have less resources at their disposal than families which have members of heads of households. And then another challenge that comes up again in terms of coordination response is that women on the move are typically more vulnerable to gender-based violence and more vulnerable to violence in general. So I think we need to think about protection in a different way, given the sheer scale of disasters that we're seeing and given the current scenarios that we may expect from great situations and how to support them.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Just a quick word here. When we talk about coordination, and Anita Keshav talked about interdepartmental, interprovincial, I'd just like to add that it's extremely important to have coordination between community and the different departments. Because when you're giving communities the community-based disaster risk management training workshops, that is the right and appropriate forum to create the communication links between them and the concerned agencies, because that is how the communities feel more protected. And what I have seen is that they don't have any access information. They're given the early warning, but then what do they do next? Who do they contact? What is the next step? So those need to be made part and embedded in the policy as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for adding that. Would you like to respond to this? Or okay, yes, okay, sure. Yes. Name, affiliation, and who you want to.
So, myself, Usma Yaqub, I'm heading an organization called Forum for Dignity Initiatives. We are based in Islamabad. We are an NGO working for restoration of young girls, women involved with diversity. So, I would like to direct my question to Mr. Chairman NDRMF. We hear like very fancy conversations around coordination, proactive disaster management preparations, everything. But sometimes, most of the times, we feel that the lens and approach of right-based disaster management preparations is missing. Thinking about young women, women with all their vulnerabilities, women with disabilities, young girls, the issue of sexual gender-based violence, issue of access to menstruation hygiene, contraceptives, safe spaces. This conversation is missing, and this also reflects when we are on the field after the rescues. So this is the first part of my question, that how much NDRMF is mindful while working with different stakeholders, because I do understand that only NGOs bring this perspective, but I would really like to see NDRMF more proactive on this lens. So second part of my question is that how much NDRMF is mindful with all the key stakeholders using all those resources, because we see like after 3 months usually all the camps are vacant. People just go back to the places wherever they find. So all those resources are there, they turn to be trashed, they turn to be waste. So are you thinking, or is your team thinking to recycle those resources like tents, camps materials, whatever is available there? Because that can also be contributing to have cost-effective preparations for next disaster you may come for.
Thank you very much, Usman. Would you just pass the mic to the gentleman?
Hello, my name is Azmat Khan, and I'm working with a local organization, Foundation for Development in Pakistan. And I would like Mr. Hans to shed some light on this. You very rightly said that we are on the reverse journey, and the commitments of the Grand Bargain and the World Humanitarian Summit, and we are seeing a big increase in the humanitarian need globally, and then taking space, and it is obvious that the resources cannot keep pace with the growing humanitarian needs. So the only way is this proactive disaster management and resilience building, and you have seen that the local communities and the local authorities have this vision, and they go for this innovation. What can organizations like ADPC and the UN bodies they can do to push the donor states for fulfilling their commitments of increasing the direct aid to the local actors?
Thank you so much for that. Could you just pass the microphone in the back?
Thank you. My name is Ben Webster from the Risk Informed Early Action Partnership, or REAP. Thanks so much for the presentation. My question was prompted by a session yesterday in the CARICOM Pavilion where someone was saying that hazards don't respect boundaries and borders. So I guess the question is around for ADPC and countries in the region, when we have different systems and indicators and processes, and how does that regional response come about, and what's the learning from your region that can be shared with other regions? How do we do this better collectively? And if I can be greedy, there's a second question as well for Catherine. In terms of the short-term horizon, there's lots of focus on the imminent extreme weather events that we're likely to be facing in the next few years and being prepared for those. But, you know, with UNDP's long-term view, how do we work across these different time frames so that we are preparing for the decades to come and the centuries to come, not only just trying to get ahead of the curve right now?
Thank you very much. How do we get the regions to talk to each other? Sorry?
I'll respond to the first two questions. We have a very elaborate gender and child cell in NDRMF, and it's been there for a couple of years, but now we have expanded its scope. We also understand that since the disaster management got evolved, that part of the responsibility went to the community at the district and the provincial levels. So some of the responses which are with regards to not only the women and the children, but also all vulnerable communities. We are now expanding the database so that we have exact count of all these figures in the areas of our future impacted vulnerable disasters. And then what we are doing that, we are also taking account of the specific needs of women, child, vulnerable, homeless, jobless, addicts, and everybody. All others who do not have direct support access to that. With regards to the disposal of the used relief articles, some of the relief articles can be used again. They are given to the districts to have their own warehouses like generators, motor boats, water purification equipment, and others. But some are more like with a limited shelf life, they get perished quickly. Sometimes they are written off like tanks and blankets, and at times they are given to the communities when they move to the permanent houses. So this is the same practice which is being followed in most of the provinces and districts. But we guess that we can, as we are trying to find out what warehousing strategy for our own NDMA, we are trying to identify only those articles which are not in the capacity of provinces to hold and build. Only those articles are the focus of NDMA's warehouses and stocks. Like we would like to have basic kitchen articles or the tent articles to be developed by the district and provinces themselves. And our local industry is partnered with them. And then for the high costly items, we are coordinating with our commissions and high commissions abroad, diplomatic channels, so that we can get it, even if it's not available in Pakistan, we can get it from overseas and we get it deployed. But most of them will have to be returned or recycled or reused.
Thanks so much. In terms of future perspectives, questions on UNDP also has from our DRR portfolio also the largest application for the system as well. So it definitely is about making both those kind of investments in tandem. And then I would say the other point that is about is that we really are we're a development act about human development, about human security, freedom from war. I think this is something that's really underpins all of our work. And so the prevention principles are really here. And if we understand that in terms of all of our work, it's not just climate action, it's important. It's also making sure that climate action is understood as part of this prevention work along with adaptation and disaster risk reduction. So I really think those efforts go hand in hand. We've done a lot of work to decentralise our local teams so that they are closer to countries in need, and we're not only working in regions with countries which might be considered hotspots for disasters, but also looking more broadly at countries that are at risk. For those who aren't familiar with UNDP, I'll try to give that elevator pitch short. We do have a presence in 117 different locations around the world, like cross country offices and also regional hubs at the same time. We also have networks of local actors, ecosystems that go right down to the local level, so working with research, also think tanks, universities and other partners as well. So I think there's also to make about being very informed during the after as well. That's important as well, the learning aspect of it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before delving into the question by the gentleman here, I just wanted to raise one point. For the past 5 years, NDRMF has been working on what we call a framework for integrating rights and promoting equality. It's a tool that is been tested in enormous bodies, and I hope that in this context we can make that available and be able to ensure sure that these items that we're talking about and being able to use the experience in humanitarian assistance, etc., of dealing with camp management and other safety issues. So I think there's a lot of knowledge, and I think again here, as the committee was pointing out, the chair was pointing out, that there are steps to move in that direction. Going back to the grand bargain and the issue of what can be done and what are we doing, we are actually trying to introduce the very boring element of accounting as part of capacity building with local entities on the ground. We have a project funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, in where we're trying to pull together the local government, civil society, private sector. And one of the elements there, in order to make sure that particularly civil society and local government can have access to more finances, more financial resources, the need to have a minimum to be able to receive and manage that. You can only really deal with that by providing that kind of training. Now, the tricky question I think comes in on what's good enough. And if you're talking certain amounts of money, we may not be in the same standards as other amounts of money. And one of the approaches will be that you start looking at coming to agreement with some of the international development partners on what is the minimum standard, and then how can you ensure that you have a substantial number of local actors which fulfills that minimum standard, and that you can transfer funds to. Maybe it could be $20,000, $50,000, but it has to be directed quickly to have benefit, etc. So I mean that's one element that one can deal with in this context. And I think that needs then to be institutionalized. So you will, for example, come on a roster, but then you have to take some certain tests, or at least some people will have to have some tests. I can't see any other way around it, because we will not end up with just putting money down, apart from some issues of early action or forecast-based financing, etc. Issue funds and you're out to do whatever you like. There was another element part of the sort of coordination of what can we learn from other agencies or other experiences, and particularly in the context of transboundary or cross-border issues. In some cases we're talking that the impact is transboundary. Flood is a very good example. And early warning, if you look at the Mekong River, there is a regional flood warning which is used by the countries and contextualized for Cambodia, who by this regional early warning gets an additional 4 days of the mainstream will do in terms of early warning, etc. And another important, and we are constantly trying to update that. Another element is the capacity of response. And I think ASEAN has some work in there that is quite interesting in trying to find a standard, much like the UN standard for heavy response, light response, etc. This is a bit slightly different in that at least you should know that people who have a certain certification, they have certain skills. So in principle they can be used interchangeably and perhaps assist. A third tricky question, which I know is discussed in Central Asia, I'm not sure here, and to some extent in Southeast Asia, is the issue of transport equipment. You're talking helicopters, you're talking boats, you're talking machinery, etc., etc. Getting it across the border needs preparation in advance. And if you compare, for example, how Europe responds to a forest disaster in Greece, etc. When you pull in the machine from Spain, from other places, you bring in firefighters from different countries because it's all part of the EU. And there's still some interministerial competitions, etc. But in effect it works. Sweden, I'm coming from Sweden, we didn't have enough firefighters back in 10 years ago. So the Danish, the German and others, and we don't have any planes that can water. So the Spaniards and the Italians and others came up and assisted with that. Now, that is very difficult, particularly when we start talking about equipment that is on the borderline between military and civilian, which some of these equipment have different purposes, etc. But I think that's an area where a lot of discussion is ongoing. I know Kazakhstan, who has a lot of capacity, is in discussion with surrounding countries about being able to supply equipment and people across the border to help with responses. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much for that elaborate answer on the regions that come together. We have 2 last questions from here, and then we'll wrap it up.
Thank you. I'm Mohammad Ahmad and I'm chairperson of National So as we all know, I'm working in the humanitarian sector for the last 20 years, and every year we are faced with different kind of disaster. For one disaster we do preparation and we are surprised by the nature and we got another. And this is happening in Pakistan. But by virtue of that, we have a repository of knowledge. And now we have high-tech solutions for early warning and data science as well. I would like to thank NDPC for the Asian preparedness partnership and for the care that they put there. Can we think of Pakistan via knowledge hub, right from the community practices to the high-tech solution and information sharing for the region, because in NDP, South Asia and East Asian countries are also involved. So can we elaborate a partnership and each country can be a focal country for something? And as we have this facility now, and we are good at it. So I think if Pakistan will be given opportunity and will have some investment there, so Pakistan can get that leading. Thank you.
Thank you so much. How can we get what Pakistan has done to replicate in other places?
Yes, thank you. Maybe a little bit of context. The Asian Preparedness Partnership is currently composed of 8 countries, including Pakistan, which are working on this issue that I mentioned of trying to find better cooperation at the local level between the local government and NGOs and private business. What you're talking about is the regional component of that, in terms of being able to share greater knowledge, body of knowledge, etc. And perhaps looking at the opportunity of this center that has a lot of capacity when it comes to information management, dissemination, etc. And I think on a project level, bring it up, put it forward, and ensure that there are opportunities for Bangladesh to take a lead in these areas. There are other capacities in other countries also, and I think I would say that's a good opportunity. I think we should not underestimate, and it goes back to my first point that I made some time back, is with an enormous amount of information, the ability to be able to make sense of it, have it access, being able to draw conclusions, to have the analytics of it, to learn from it, that requires quite a lot of time and effort. And if that's made available, you can have a lot of good products. But we also know that history is littered by websites and think tanks and knowledge hubs that just sit there, because the information is there, there's a lot of information, it's not updated now. But what was often lacking was that you have to process that information to make it useful, to contextualize it for other places. Because when we are talking about local events, you are very familiar with this, it's a lot of effort, because each and every place needs to at least be contextualized or confirm that something else is similar enough so we can apply it. You can't apply it blindly. You have to make sure that it may not be needed to be modified, but in many cases it has. But if that effort is available, if those resources are available, we can also come up with some very, very good products and supporting information.
Thank you so much. Just any last parting thoughts from any of the panelists in terms of something that you may have raised?
I guess once we are preparing these proactive landscape of disaster management, it's important to also have a fair idea of our losses and damages control mechanisms and reduction strategies. For example, if we have our databases collected as of today and we are projecting it for a disaster after 3 months' time, then obviously by the time the disaster would happen, this data would have changed. So our needs would also be requiring some revisions and bit course corrections. And the estimates of all our NGOs or partners, whatever they would have done before time, whenever it would happen, I think it would require a very constant engagement with disaster management early warning projections, we have mechanisms to people of knowledge and then people on ground to update this data because data would remain centric to all effective responses that we have to give, whether we talk of women, children, elderly, dispersed people, and then when we are absolutely clear on this technology platform and that we are able to project our disasters more clearly, the job will become more easy because then we will be focused on those high priority areas and arranging for their needs. But I think besides that, it's important for us to also focus on the areas on the shoulders of these disasters, because these are the areas where people would migrate and get relocated, and they would also need to be stocked in time for the assistant requirement of articles of relief and assistance, so that whenever these are overcrowded, so they also do not become the second order disaster of the other kind. We would be managing our poly disasters, as we call it, like one disaster leading to a couple of other localized disasters. It would be important for us to understand that who all will take lead in those stages and who all need to control that mechanism of spread of that losses and damages in those phases. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I think it's a great question on knowledge management as well. And a lot of times in our program, of course, we are really focused on the technical aspects of being able to deliver, and we don't make sufficient investments into knowledge management. And I think these efforts really do require an investment, not only a financial investment, but an investment in terms of human resources as well. And I think about the webinar series that we did ahead of COP, and maybe we had some 450, 500 participants joining online. We did it in addition to the offline activities that we have at COP as well. So we know that there's so many people who won't be able to join here in person, and who will be able to benefit, who want to be able to learn, and very many experts on the ground, again, who are not part of the official negotiations, and they're not part of the delegation, so to speak. So I think definitely worth investment, and it's challenging as well because these investments, they are relatively the same as all our types of investments, and knowledge and state of the art, that changes as well as something to do to update and make sure that they want to.
I think community should be made and put front and center in every disaster planning. And within communities, I think it is critical to embed gender sensitivity within the planning landscape. And the last thing I'd like to say is that, we are one of the custodians of the third pole in the region. And there are a lot of conversations that are taking place now about the North Pole and the South Pole. And I think we should also make an effort to make sure that the third pole is made part of that conversation.
Last thoughts from you, sir?
Thank you. I will deviate a little bit from the topic when talking about disasters, but I think looking at all of these aspects of response, of being able to have early warnings, to be able to have these elements of being able to provide the support and humanitarian assistance and financial tools. The flip side of that is also we really need to take a hard look on where are the risk reduction opportunities, the disaster risk reduction. Where can we invest in making sure that we will not be so exposed in the future, that communities will not only have a better way of responding to a disaster, but actually the impact of that disaster is already mitigated to a certain extent by structural and non-structural interventions. And I think there is a need there also to make sure that we don't look at it as humanitarian and responsive and then on the other hand development, but there is a nexus in between here in terms of looking at the cross on. One element is to reducing the risk, another one is to provide early warning, another one is to provide preparedness. And also preparedness should include preparedness for the recovery that is happening afterwards also. And I think we'd like to push very hard for all of that spectrum to be addressed in order for a safer future.
Thank you so much. You wrapped it up for me. So better planning, better coordination, better preparedness will help us ensure that we spend the money where we're supposed to be spending. A round of applause for our esteemed panel. Can we get together for the photo, please?
Ma'am, shades there.